Enda McDonagh is my name. I am the environmental manager for Bordemona. We have a new department in Bordemona through our new relaunch, which is the Land and Habitats Department, and that looks after our 80,000 hectares of peatlands. And today I'm going to talk to you about measurement of water quality benefits from Bordemona's PCAS scheme. So anyone that's been watching the news lately or keeping abreast of all things environmental would know that Bordemona have changed its image and it's now going from a brown to green strategy. So this brown to green strategy, brown being an apt colour for peatlands, has managed the company's transformation into a sustainable green business. We use our land assets in a new way to include renewable energy, resource recovery and commercial business projects in support of government policy and national decarbonisation commitments. We're looking to sustain employment in Bordemona as we exit peat harvesting. In June 2020, last year, we decided to suspend our remaining peat harvesting operations. We then reassigned impacted employees to what was then called our Enhanced Peatland Decommissioning and Rehabilitation Scheme. Has been through various iterations, as you'll see since then. The scheme involves a wide array of engineering and ecology works designed to encourage and accelerate natural recolonisation and restoration processes. Then in July 2020, the government announced a July stimulus plan, and that included an allocation of 15 million towards peatlands rehabilitation. And then in December 2020, a further announcement of 108 million for the Peatlands Climate Action Fund, which is supported by an investment of Bordemona of a further 17 million euro. So just to give a bit of background from Bordemona's peatlands, despite what people would think, we only own 7% of Ireland's peatlands, which equates to about 80,000 hectares. The balance then of the peatlands climate or the peatlands landscape in Ireland would be 1.2 million hectares, which would be a mixture of blanket bogs, primarily, I suppose, on the western and to a lesser extent the eastern seaboard. Ireland's preserved raised bog network, so there's already a preserved raised bog network, mostly managed by National Parks and Wildlife. We would then have commercial horticulture operators, a significant number of those, mostly in the Midland counties, commercial turf cutting, and then private turbary. Private turbary then would be people's right to cut turf for their own heart, as it traditionally was, or more case now it would be the harvesting of turf for sale. So what are benefits overall of bog rehabilitation? Increased carbon storage and reduction in carbon emissions. So the increased carbon storage will be the carbon that's stored in the peatlands, and the reduction in emissions will be related to the fact that we've ceased producing peat. And then in the future, we'll be accelerating this towards carbon sequestration. That comes in a significant period of time afterwards, post rehabilitation and restoration. So it's not something that happens immediately. Biodiversity provision, improved water quality, which would be the main area of discussion for today. Water flow attenuation, so return the peatlands back to their natural water retention capacity. And then improvements in improving and environmentally stabling the landscape. So an open barren landscape that would have been milled, open to the elements, will have a certain number of environmental impacts, and we have to satisfy the EPA that we don't leave any remaining environmental liabilities for the state. So the process we went through, we picked 19 bogs for FY22, some of which have commenced. These would be a number of bogs, primarily in counties Offaly, but also some in Galway, Longford, Roscommon, and one or so on the border of Offaly and Kildare, the Rumors Bog, just north of Monasterevin. So this would be about a quarter of the area that would qualify for the scheme. And these were the basis of the commencement of our consultation process. So the process in itself, where you'll see this scheme is referred to the PCAS scheme, which is the Peatlands Climate Action Scheme. It had various iterations. I think the one the department are settling at the moment is the Environmental Decommissioning, Rehabilitation, Restoration Scheme. A mouthful, but again, it does cover all the gambits of what we're trying to achieve. So the process itself was a significant element of stakeholder engagement. Drainage management plans early on in the process, we recognized that Our neighbours, our farming communities may have concerns about what would happen to or any impact on their drainage capacity of their lands or perceived flooding impact. I suppose the initial indication from neighbours would have been that we were flooding the bogs, and through a various process stakeholder engagement, we hope we've tried to put their minds at ease and take them through the process that it's re-wetting the bog as opposed to flooding. So then we would have had to develop engineering methods for rehabilitation. Basic rehabilitation has been long undertaken by National Parks and Wildlife, but this was an enhanced element. So we looked at some work in the north, in the UK, various research agencies, and came up with a number of engineering methods that would help to accelerate the rehabilitation. Unfortunately and unfortunately, our predecessors would have used the peatlands at the time for getting from dryland to dryland, and would have constructed various towers and trackway across our peatlands, all very well preserved. So we had to carry out archaeological impact assessments to ensure that our work didn't impact on these structures. And then we included success criteria as required by the department, that this obviously would preserve the archaeological features in situ. So it's a benefit. But there was a good opportunity here to record any archaeology prior to the rehabilitation. So this is another added benefit of the scheme that wasn't initially envisaged. We then had to go through appropriate assessments, screen all of our bogs for NIS, and then develop determinations where they applied. Out of this then flew our environmental management plans. So these environmental management plans would be a combination of our 14 IPC license conditions where they applied to the remaining activity, various NIS mitigation measures that would have arisen from the NIS process, and then general good environmental practice and some site-specific measures that came from the NIS. So out of this process, then we developed the rehabilitation plans, and then associated map books, the maps and the orthos that we developed from our GIS department gave us great information and baseline data on the peatlands as they are now, so that we can adequately, hopefully, demonstrate the success criteria when the work is completed. We then have a wide range of internal and external expertise: environmental, engineering, hydrology, ecology, archaeology, health and safety, and project management is the process we use for managing this project from inception to completion. Some of the agencies that we've engaged with since early last year, COVID restrictions restricting a lot of our community engagement, but obviously would be the 5 main local authorities: Longford, Roscommon, Offaly, Kildare and Galway, as the peatlands were in those counties primarily this year. Next year we'll have another 15 or 20 bogs, and then we might be starting to bring in local authorities as that rehabilitation comes to a bog near you as such. Other agencies and stakeholders would include the National Monument Service and the National Museum of Ireland in relation to the archaeological reserve. Ireland has what's called the Valletta Convention, which is an opportunity to, a requirement, a commitment to create archaeological reserves, and the peatlands restoration programme is naturally providing and adding to that requirement. Inland Fisheries Ireland, we have a number of, obviously we have 600 or 700 silt control ponds in our outlets, so we have engaged with those, the Fisheries Ireland, in relation to how these are managed now and how they're going to be decommissioned in the future. The Water Forum, an increasingly important body that we're engaging with. They've had a couple of presentations recently on water quality benefits and peatlands, so we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. IFA and ICMSA, a lot of engagement with those two agencies regarding to farmers' concerns regarding impact on their own farmlands. The Environmental Protection Agency, primarily probably number one, along with the National Parks and Wildlife and DEC. We've also had engagement with the OPW to gauge their input into the process and to see would there be any benefits regarding returning the peatlands to their natural water retention function, which would aid flooding prevention to a small degree, but definitely would reduce because it reduced our pumping requirements and would naturally retain the water in the peatlands. National Parks and Wildlife, I mentioned, the Heritage Council and various other agencies, state agencies, and then primarily local residents and landowners. And we did start that process back in November. We're very restricted regarding house-to-house interactions with our neighbours and leaflet drops. We developed a website, an email portal, and have had numerous stakeholder meetings with hundreds of Board of Monagh employees, neighbours, residents, state agencies and NGOs. Other stakeholders we talked about would be An Taisce, Friends of the Irish Environment, Birdwatch Ireland, Irish Peatland Conservation Council, who have been well ahead of Board of Monagh regarding peatlands conservation, Irish Wildlife Trust, Back Conservation Ireland, Woodlands of Ireland. Other key groups with the Community Wetlands Forum, a significant community group made up of very interested communities involved are looking to engage with Board of Monagh and other peatlands in their areas regarding restoration. Turf Gutters and Contract Association, Game Council, and the Midlands and Eastern Regional Water Framework Directive Operation Committee, which would manage the Water Framework Directive and the improvement measures required, the Shannon Flood Risk State Agency, and then obviously the Just Transition Commissioner. So some of the theme of responses, concerns, positive and negative, would be one of the most popular feedback would be the amenity and after-use potential. So the obligation under license and the terms of the PCAS scheme excludes any after-use, but we have a department who are engaging with interested parties regarding the eventual amenity and after-use potential of these peatlands. But the PCAS scheme itself, terms only cover the decommissioning, rehabilitation and restoration of the peatlands. After-use will have to come under its own scheme. Opportunities for maximising biodiversity benefit, impacts of joint turf cutting rights. So the turbary rights I talked about earlier on for our neighbours to cut turf. So we had to make sure that we weren't impacted in those areas and keep our activities within our boundary and reassure people that that's our obligation. Alignment with other initiatives. There's a vast array of initiatives and research projects out there, so we needed to show alignment with those. Flooding impact concern we talked about. The post-rehabilitation draining obligations. Some people were concerned that Board of Monagh would have been leaving the landscape. We still own these peatlands, we still manage them on behalf of the state, so we have an obligation to adequately manage those post the works. Then post-rehabilitation access rights, and then the consents process itself and how that went through. The primary objective is to bring our peatlands from this bare peat to rehabilitated peatlands. Some of the benefits would be to the enhanced process itself would be to remove gravity drainage paths, put water into higher bare peat areas, create raised water features or cells to push water into higher peatland areas, slow the water movement across the peat surface, to retain winter flood levels in lower peatlands, to reduce the hydraulic gradients that migrate rainwater off the peatlands, and then return the bogs to their natural water retention function. So the main impacts on water quality would be suspended solids and ammonia from our operations. And these would have come from our original production process and the associated bare peat. We talked about the 19 bogs we've identified in the Shannon and Barrow water bodies. There's over 181 surface water emissions that we've started sampling, some for the preceding year's rehab, and 39 specifically for these 22 bogs. We analysed them for a range of licence parameters, and we've included dissolved organic carbon, try and capture that element of it as well. But we then have the ongoing quality monitoring as required under our licence. That is a separate funded obligation, not under the scheme. And then we've installed hundreds of piezometric tubes to try and get a capture baseline and to see what the water levels are doing post the works. The site selection criteria was mostly this year was peat bogs that we had no remaining peat stocks. We tried to capture 70%, up to a minimum of 70% of the bogs catchments because we have a large number of outlets. Accessibility, health and safety, and the seasonality of the work would be a big factor. And then obviously rivers that are under peat pressure from previous exercise carried out under the law pro. So we know our peatlands that are impacted on water quality. This would have then developed these water quality maps, which would have filtered out and made sure we were catching a large number of those areas. And then we would develop water quality maps, which would have indicated our outlets and EPA and associated Bord na Móna sampling points. The monitoring parameters we talked about would have been flow, suspended solids, total phosphorus and ammonia. We then talked about including DOC. And the supporting data, then we would have got data sets from EPA and LawPro on the peat pressure water bodies that are going into the third iteration of the River Basin Management Plan, and then the EPA's monitoring network. We're reluctant to hang our hat on some trends, but basically some work we've carried out in Corlea Bog, which would be basic rehabilitation, and Longford Pass Bog would show an improving trajectory on ammonia. And then obviously the enhanced element of this would be to speed that up and to increase that trajectory. What would the success criteria look like? That there's a stabilizing and improving concentration of suspended solids and ammonia on discharges from our peatlands. And then that the receiving waters then would indicate an improving trajectory in water quality. So any peatlands at risk from peatland or peat extraction would see an improvement, even if that river was still at risk from peat extraction or other peatlands, and that's an improving trajectory on a sustainable trajectory post the work. So we will continue to monitor and verify. Some photographs of trials we've carried out in Castlegar Bog show the extent of one of the bogs, the various rehabilitation methods that we've used to retain the water in the peatlands. This is very much a trial site that's moved from simple drain blocking to cells on the bottom left and the bottom right, to more larger structures to try and maximize the open water surface. These will be pictures then of the various elements of types of peatlands that we'd hope to develop, from dry heath to wetlands and open water, and birchland scrub, not necessarily as much due to re-wetting, but again, it's to return the peatlands to its natural ecosystem and its functioning elements. Other work we carry out a lot of work for National Parks and Wildlife. We have a number of tenders we were awarded in the last number of years to carry out work on behalf of their restoration sites. And we have a large team of project managers, engineers, surveyors, ecologists, and a significant element of GIS and GIS operatives, land investigation officers, and community liaison personnel to assist in developing these plans. These are some photographs of some work carried out on various bogs, bogs that would have had peat extraction, domestic turf cutting ceased, and would have required drain blocking and some work up in the high bog to retain as much water as we could. And then finally, further information to myself, through contacts to this forum. There's also the government website that indicates the elements of the scheme and what qualifies and what doesn't. We have our own Bord na Móna PCAS website that provides further information on the rehab plans themselves, the map books, and the general information and background. And then our own main new Bord na Móna website from our new identity, we have a significant section there on peatlands rehabilitation. Thank you.